Welcome to the MSL 411, a podcast designed to equip both aspiring and experienced MSLs with the resources they need to level up their career toolkit. The heart of this podcast is to take the same industry knowledge and advice that we share with our own candidates and make it available and accessible to anyone looking for answers. So if you have questions, you've come to the right place. We're here to give you the 411. And without further ado, let's dive right in.
Hey, welcome back to the MSL 411 podcast. We are excited for another episode of the Resume Roadmap Month for the month of September. We are doing deep dives on the resume. If you have not checked out our first episode that we dropped on resumes back in season 1, go listen to that. But this is the time for our deep dive, and today's deep dive is going to be on the experience section with a focus on aspiring MSLs and how they should write that and frame that. So we are going to be offering specific examples on how to craft a great experience section without spending a fortune to hire somebody to write that for you. So we will be kind of doing a little bit of a recap of some things we talked about in our other episodes. If you haven't checked that one out, go take a look at it. It's more geared at experienced MSLs, but still has a lot of valuable content. But Linda, for the purposes of this one here, how would you coach someone to write their bullet points within their experience section as an aspiring MSL to craft a great experience section?
Yeah, well, it's the same advice we gave our experienced MSLs in our last episode, like you mentioned. So just using the 3-point format of action, verb, situation, and impact to kind of craft each bullet point. So starting with an action verb, this is something you led, something you established, something you created, or you did something. And then following that with the situation. So this is something that you participated in. It was the project you were involved in, anything like that. And a good point for people aspiring to move into the MSL role is to really, if you're applying for a job, take a look at the job description and see what types of activities are involved in this position, and kind of think about what you've done in your career thus far that kind of mirrors that or is the same type of responsibility. And put that in there and describe it, because that's going to speak a little bit more to the hiring manager. And then following that situation, you want to put the impact. Those are the results, the metrics, the measurable results of this activity. So what came of that situation? So if there's any kind of measurable results, that's going to speak a little bit more to how much value you brought to that project or to that team activity. And so I think aspiring MSLs have a lot of trouble translating their clinical background or their research experience to how that relates to an MSL role. And so if you're, like I said, just kind of taking a look at the job description, and they are going to be doing a lot of work in clinical trials or going to be doing a lot of work, cross-functional work with different teams, and you've worked maybe with some of those areas, that's a good place to say, oh, okay, that tips me off to put some bullet points about my activities in that area. Yeah. And so really highlighting how your experience comes into play for that team and what they're doing. So the action, verb, situation, impact is the way to go, just to make a big impact with each bullet point, really make them count and really make them speak to the hiring manager about the value that you can bring to their team, especially when you don't have that MSL experience to lean back on. You really want to convey, this is what I've done. These are the situations I've found myself in, and this is the impact I've brought, or these are the results I'm able to get in this role. And I can do that same thing for you too.
Yeah. What that particular skill set that you worked on in your role, what is being taken with you into that MSL role is what you want to demonstrate, whether that is a skill set or maybe that's your ability to work with a variety of physicians and healthcare providers. Maybe you were working with the pharmacy team, but you were also working with nurses and other type of practitioners in a hospital setting. It's a skill that you're demonstrating, but at the same time, you're demonstrating the experience of communicating information and working with a whole variety of people. So, you want to demonstrate what the actual task was that you did and the transferable skill that you achieved through that, and can show that to the hiring manager.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we will move into kind of giving some examples.
Yeah, well, we definitely see a lot of resumes from folks looking to get into the MSL role. And so I think that we have some great examples here that we're going to show of ways folks have crafted really well-written bullet points to convey the experience they brought that would directly relate to the MSL role. And so we want to get into that. We see, like I said, a ton of variety of resumes, lots of detail, some that are generic, some that are really great. So we're going to talk about that. Ashley, what are some of the components of a really standout resume when you see someone trying to get into the MSL role and you say, great, send me your CV, send me your resume, and they send it to you and you're like, wow, this is amazing. What does that look like for you?
Well, in preparation for this episode, I pulled some resumes from candidates that I helped place in their first MSL role. So we know their resume was liked and well received, but I thought that this would be helpful because these were the kinds of things that caught my attention. I know they caught our hiring manager's attention, and just some really well written content that I wanted to share with you guys that demonstrate, what we were just talking about with the situation, with the impact, and then, the things that someone can infer by the level of detail that you provided in those bullet points, but then also ask more questions when you get in that interview setting. So, I have one candidate here. What we're going to give examples of PhD backgrounds and PharmD backgrounds, because as you know, that makes up about 75-80% of MSLs. But this gentleman here, he is a PhD, and he worked in a lot of clinical trial management as a clinical research coordinator. And some of the things that he had listed here I thought were very well written, give a ton of information, and also left a lot to be desired for the hiring manager to be like, okay, I want to know more about that. So one of the examples here is establish and maintain relationships with academic researchers, private practitioners, and industry thought leaders in the field of rare diseases. So it shows you what he did and who he did it with, and the variety of who he did it with, which I really like. And it also gives you a little bit of a nugget about the specific therapeutic area or disease state. So that's number one thing that I really like to look for is what are the specific details with the therapeutic areas they've worked in, disease states they've worked in. Also, I would say drug names or examples of clinical trials you might have supported. Those are things that I will see on the standout resume. Also, he touches later on some of the regional conferences or associations that he was involved in. He mentions attending professional conferences, patient advocacy and support groups, and other relevant meetings to raise awareness about rare disease research. So again, fantastic. I know the kinds of conferences he was going to. He's familiar with that environment. It also gives you a little nugget as a hiring manager to dig in on. Like, tell me more about the conferences you attended. Tell me about the relationships that you built at those conferences. Which rare disease conferences were you at? Those are connection points that a hiring manager would be excited to dig in. So this is really well written. I really like this. And it goes on to say, and to promote collaborations with external entities. So there's that action. He's promoting the collaborations, the target audience. And I want to know more about what those collaborations were, because that is, very closely tied to what he's been doing in the MSL role, is representing his company and working on those partnerships. So I think that's a really great, well-written bullet point. That's something I'd like to see in a great standout resume, has that level of detail. If that's something that you've done in your role. Of course, not everybody has. But I would also encourage any other close partnerships that you have with other institutions as well. Maybe you are at a smaller center that works really closely with the oncology department at the big boss down the street. Whatever those relationships are, those are great things to highlight as well. And so digging more into more examples here, another bullet point that I'm seeing is preparing and conducting educational sessions, and he describes the different people that were in the audience. And so this is showing that he's able to take scientific information and disseminate it to a wide variety of people with different educational levels. He's able to craft and translate that message into something that's applicable for several groups of people, and tailor it to their needs. It goes on to say, including review of rare diseases and additional topics relevant to good clinical research practices. Right, well written, gives you that action, gives you the audience, gives you the impact of it. And then just some other examples on here is he outlines some of the disease state areas that he was a study coordinator for. There were several neuroimmunology areas that he had been working in. So he talks about working in Duchenne's, he talks about working in spinal muscular atrophy, and some other areas that he had been involved in as a backup study coordinator for those trials. So, these are buzzwords I think that would catch somebody's attention, given his experience, and gives you a little bit more of a tangible example of what he's been doing, rather than just saying, worked in rare disease. So I like that one as well. This is a different position that he had held as a clinical trial, like project manager kind of role. He indicated that he was supervising multiple clinical trials at different stages, from first in humans, phase 1 studies, all the way to phase 2 and 3 in the area of hematology oncology. So this is showing me that he was a supervisor. He worked in clinical trials at different stages, and it tells me that therapeutic area that he was working in. So great information, great, well written bullet points, gives me all of the relevant info without being too vague. So these are just a couple of examples of things that I really liked in the resume that pack a punch and are very relevant to what he would be doing in the MSL role, and it would be really attractive for a hiring manager. The next resume that I have in front of me, now this person had theirs written initially more CV style than resume. We really encourage you guys to have a resume format, not just the CV, because they really want that detail. You can't show that action and impact in the CV style. And so, but what they had done is they had kind of a key achievements and experience section that summarized the whole of their experience. And so that included things like developing objectives, strategies, and protocols for research in the particular area that they had been working in. And so they talk about the disease state that they worked in. They talked about the fact that they were developing these things. And then they mentioned that they were supporting and developing protocols and strategies. So it's showing that strategic mindset that they have, that they had a leadership and ownership over a particular project. And it gives a specific therapeutic area that they're working in. So I think that's a great, well-written bullet point. But with it not being attached to the particular position, you kind of lose a little bit of that. So I would really move that sort of information into the actual professional experience section in order to have this really organized in a more ideal way. They also talk about enhancing patient recruitment into clinical trials through phone screens that identified potential study participants. I can think of a client that we're working with right now that would be ecstatic to see somebody who had experience doing that. And that was, really a key achievement within their past positions. That is, well written, again, has that action verb, the impact, and it's very specific about what they were doing and what they were involved in. So a couple of examples of some well-written bullet points that are showing what these guys had done in their professional real-world experience that they are now taking into their candidacy as an MSL.
Yeah. And you made the point about the resume versus the CV, and I think that's such good advice. And often, even with our experienced MSLs, we tell them even like a hybrid of the two, where you're still listing out publications and things like that, but also you have the work experience bullet points. It's a little bit more in depth on your work experience. So throw out the old rule of your resume needs to be 1 page or less, or 2 pages or less. We don't want to see 20-page, resumes. Sometimes especially for the PhDs, the publication section can get long. So in those instances, maybe tailor what is most applicable to the job you're applying for and say select publications. So just a little side note there, but I'm going to give some examples from PharmD candidates here, and it's really interesting to see the difference that the 2 degrees bring, one more research and teaching and one more clinical and patient-centered, but they both have their important roles and things they bring to teams. So this person here is a clinical oncology pharmacist. So right off the bat, a little bit about them. Just by title alone, they have clinical experience, oncology experience, probably patient facing. So this person, like I said, clinical oncology pharmacist, there's the first work experience is as a clinical pediatric oncology pharmacist. And so this person mentions that she was a pediatric oncology pharmacist in inpatient, outpatient clinics, and also in the infusion center setting. And I think that's really important because it allows the hiring manager or the recruiter, whoever's reading the resume, to see, okay, these are the settings they've been working in. They've worked with healthcare providers. They've worked at the bedside with patient in those inpatient centers. They've worked in the infusion setting. So they've been, hand in hand with the patient, helping them through the process. They've worked in outpatient, so they've seen that setting too. And so they've already kind of set the stage of the types of places where they are already familiar with and already have that experience. She goes on in the same bullet point to talk about some of her day-to-day job duties. So whether she's collaborating with the physicians or the nurses at those centers and what she's doing in those collaborations, that she's, teaching and double checking regimens and doing all these kind of things. So it really gives you a good picture of what she's familiar doing and that she is exposed to these types of situations. And so if she, as an MSL, is talking to a KOL about how this product is going to help their patients in the infusion center, for example, she's got that firsthand knowledge. And so it really helps the hiring manager to say, well, this person doesn't have MSL experience, but they probably are going to be able to speak to the providers in these situations a little bit better than this MSL who has 2 years of experience, because they don't have that in those centers or that experience. So it might give a little
peer
edge.
level kind of conversation.
Yeah, exactly. So they're walking into maybe not with the MSL experience, but they're walking into sites that are second nature to them. And so I think that it really gives this candidate a leg up for sure.
Yeah.
Another position, she is a pharmacy manager, and she lists out some of the tasks that she performed. That she works on the federal and the state compliancy end of things in the oncology infusion centers, in the clinical pharmacy, and that she works with DEA paperwork and things like that. So again, gives a fully encompassing picture of the types of projects that she's been involved in. I think when she mentions the DEA paperwork, there are some companies that have trials where they're partnering with different government agencies. So the fact that she has that partnership familiarity might speak to that hiring manager.
She kind of knows that language.
Yeah, especially if she's applying for a job where she's done her research and sees that they're partnering with the NIH on a study or something like that, then she can maybe tie in that she's worked on government type things before. So she's really given some key information here in these bullet points. One last one from this CV is that she was the clinical liaison between the nursing department, the physicians for oncology, the pharmacy itself, and helped with protocol building, with implementing protocols, things like that. So again, that might be another key thing that speaks to a certain hiring manager. And if you're looking over the job description for the job you're applying for and you see that some of these things are going to be applicable, move that bullet point up a little higher, bump it up to the top, because you want, if the hiring manager is just glancing over your CV in a minute or two, you want them to see the key stuff that speaks directly to them, directly to their team, right at the top. So I think this person did a really great job of saying, not just in her title, which again is a giveaway of some of the experience that she's had, oncology clinical experience, but says where I've been working, what settings, here are some of the projects I've worked on, here are some of the people I've collaborated with, here's what's familiar to me, and here's where, if I was an MSL and going into these situations, this is going to be second nature for me. I can talk the language that these people talk. So I think she's done a really great job there.
And even the pediatric experience too.
Oh yeah.
That's not the majority of oncology treatments out there. So the fact that she specialized and took that extra step to indicate that she worked in oncology with pediatrics specifically, again, those are kind of key details that will catch somebody's attention. So.
Yeah, and I think that in particular is a really great point you make, because sometimes those pediatric oncologists are very particular with the MSLs they speak to. And so having that pediatric experience, again, it's like speaking their language.
Yeah.
And so for a hiring manager who maybe they have a lot of oncology people on their team, but maybe nobody with that pediatric oncology background, that might be the tipping point for you. And so, playing up that angle, or you're applying for a job at a company that works with pediatric glioblastoma or something like that, that might be the tipping point for you getting an interview, or having the edge over an experienced candidate. So really great point. I have a second CV here, and this is going to be kind of on the flip side, where the bullet points, they're not terrible, but they're just a little vague. They just leave a little bit unanswered. So this person, again, is a clinical pharmacist. And so, again, you kind of have a great idea of the scenarios they've worked in. They have different therapeutic background than the last person we spoke with. They work with stem cells, with transplant, that sort of thing. So this person has a couple of bullet points that are just a little vague. One being that they effectively collaborated with physicians and other members of the healthcare team. Okay,
Yeah.
so how did they collaborate? Did they educate the nursing staff on a certain thing? Did they coordinate with the physicians at the bedside to work on the correct treatment regimen for the patient? Like, what did that collaboration look like? So there's a little bit of questions unanswered, and also what settings were these in? Was this in an inpatient, outpatient, infusion center like the last CV, or was this at the patient's bedside? Or how did this look for you? Another bullet point here is that they provided direct patient care to hematology oncology patients. Again, I mean, it's great. You worked with patients. That's great. But what did that look like? How did you work with them? What was the result of some of the things you did? Did you help them work with their medications and get something kind of figured out to where their therapy was a little bit easier to manage? Did you work with them through adverse reactions? Just what did that look like? It's just a little vague, although it does provide some information. It doesn't provide a whole lot of information, especially not information that is super relevant to a medical affairs hiring manager.
Rounds, like what exactly was the nature of the relationship?
Yeah,
that would then transfer into something that would be applicable as an MSL.
yeah. I mean, it does translate that you have experience with hematology oncology patients, but as an MSL, a lot of folks are going to have that same background, that same experience. But the medical affairs hiring manager wants to know what you did, what results you were driving, what impact you made in those patients. How closely did you work with the physicians? Because as someone coming in applying for an MSL role without MSL experience, they're wanting to see how strong your connections are with the providers, how strong your connections are with these sites that you're involved in, how closely you work with the patient. So when you do have those conversations with KOLs, you can give direct examples, or you have that kind of familiarity to fall back on. And so this leaves a little bit of that unanswered. So it's not going to speak as strongly to a hiring manager than probably someone with previous MSL experience.
Yeah, well, you make a great point too. Is every hematology oncology pharmacist out there could basically write that same bullet point. So why you? Why is this a transferable skill and transferable experience in an MSL role? When you don't have that impact statement in there, it's harder to really turn that into something. It's basically just stating this is something I've done, but I'm not really that different than any other hematology oncology pharmacist out there. So that you make a great point is, use these bullet points, use these descriptions to distinguish yourself from any other person working in your department.
Right.
Even.
Yeah. And some of that is just getting in the head of the hiring manager, seeing that they are working with a product that has a competitor already on the market. Well, so probably you're going to be going to these KOLs trying to get them to see the value in this company's product versus what they've been prescribing their patients. So how would you do that? And, I think that goes beyond just telling the hiring manager, I have hematology oncology experience. It could be worked with patients on their treatment regimens. So maybe seeing what's working for that patient and what's not, and making suggestions on how to change their therapy. And so you have that familiarity that you can take into the MSL role and go tell the KOL, yeah, I worked with patients that were on that medication before, and let me tell you about the problems they had. And here's what's different about my company's product is that it works in this different way. So you really have that experience to fall back on. So those are the kind of examples, and probably many more that we're not even mentioning, of why putting a little bit more detail in your bullet point is going to make a bigger impact for you when you don't have that MSL experience to fall back on. You want to answer all those questions of, I may not have that experience, but here's how I am kind of a plug and play candidate for this position, and I can hit the ground running and just be good with the
language.
science.
Even I know we've had clients that we've recruited for where the MSLs play maybe a bigger role in like managed care side of things than other MSL teams. Maybe they don't have a giant managed care team, so the MSLs are more involved with that kind of thing. So somebody who has experience with like formulary decision makers, maybe that's something that you sat on a board for, or were pulled in to get your perspective for. Those kinds of like impact statements that distinguish you from the other members of your team. Those are the kinds of things that again, help you get in the mind of the hiring manager.
Yeah. And I have one last bullet point, and then I'll kind of close off with the bullet points here. But I thought this was a good one to mention. The last one here: conduct clinical research projects and present results at conferences, both national and regional. And so again, that just kind of shows, okay, I present, but maybe giving more detail about what that looks like. It's great that you've been to national conferences and presented results, but were you presenting as part of a team? Did you solely present? How was the data received? Did it, just kind of giving some more information about the situation itself, and what that looked like and what you were presenting on, and
representing your department.
Yeah. So there's a lot to be added to that bullet point there. It's a good bullet point. It just needs more. And I think if we keep saying this, but if you're someone who's applying for an MSL role, you don't have that MSL experience to fall back on, you can't give too much information, because it's an uphill battle. I think everybody knows that if they've been in this position. And so the more information you can provide, the less vague you can make something. It's just going to add to your benefit of translating how your experience relates to this role. So, looking at the job description, thinking about your experience and how it's relevant, and then laying out all the detail on those points, I think is going to be the key.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point.
Well, this has been really, really good information. I hope it's helpful for all you guys out there. Of course, on the topic of resources, I wanted to kind of go there for a second. We do have a lot of really great resources available, and we have a section on our website where you can go and download some resources. Things like how to upgrade your resume templates. We have how to conduct yourself in an interview situation, all different kinds of resources on that, and much more. We've worked on those to put them in your hands as a free resource to you, and really want you guys to be able to take advantage of that. So take a look at the website on the resources tab, and you enter your email address there, and it allows you to enter and download some of these great resources that are totally available to you. So feel free to take a look at that and let us know if there's any resources that you'd like to see added, and we can maybe see about working on those for you as well. But thank you so much for joining us this week. We hope this has been really helpful information. Check back with us next Wednesday. We'll be coming with another great resume episode, so look forward to that, and we'll see you then.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to share the link, let your friends know, and of course, connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you want more information on today's topic, please feel free to reach out. Be sure to check back soon as we continue to explore the topics that matter most to you in medical affairs.